Recording live from Dallas, Texas, it's Miss Briscoe. Today we are talking about angle bisectors. So this is a new vocab word. So flip to the glossary section of your notebook and add in angle bisector. And then you should have a little colored square of paper that has a box like this that says angle bisector, and you're going to be taking notes in that box. And then you're going to glue that into your notebook. This is 1.4 day 2. So you're going to glue that underneath where you're going to write 1.4 day 2. And then there's also an example after this where you're going to take notes in your notebook, but you're going to copy it down off the screen into your notebook. Okay, so an angle bisector. We talked about the word bisect. That means to cut into two congruent pieces. So an angle bisector is something that's going to cut an angle into two congruent angles. So an angle bisector is a ray. So in our picture, it's this blue ray, ray BD, a ray that divides an angle into two congruent angles. So what this is saying is if ray BD is indeed bisecting angle ABC, that means that angle ABD, and angle DBC are going to be congruent. That was a terrible little marking, but in your notebook or in your little paper, write if ray BD bisects angle ABC, then that means that angle ABD is going to be congruent to angle DBC. So angle ABD is this angle right here, and angle DBC is this angle right here. So the way that we mark angles as congruent is we put a little curvy. And if they have the same number of curvies, that means they're congruent. So I could mark these both with one curvy, or I could mark them both with two curvies. But just like when we're marking up segments as being congruent, we put tick marks through the segments that are congruent to each other. With angles, we put these curvy marks. So if angles have the same number of curvy lines, that means that they're congruent. Another thing I want to point out, this is not an equal sign. This is a congruent symbol. So when angles are congruent, we don't put the measure. I'm at my parents' house right now, and that's their phone ringing, so just ignore that ringing phone in the background. So notice these angles are congruent, not equal. So when they're congruent, we don't put the measure symbol, we just write the angle. So we could also say the measure of angle ABD is going to be equal to the measure of angle DBC. So if your angles are congruent, you don't put the measure. If your angles are equal, you do put the measure. Okay, go ahead and copy this into your notebook. Ray YW bisects angle XYZ. So first we need to draw the angle. Notice that Y is our middle letter. And so, I don't know why my screen is doing this. So when we draw angle XYZ, Y is the vertex because it's the middle letter of the angle. So XYZ. Then ray YW, remember the first letter of a ray is the end point. So Y is my end point, and it's going to extend forever in the direction of W. So ray Y is bisecting angle XYZ. So what that means is that ray is cutting angle XYZ into two congruent angles. So in the first situation, part A, if the measure of angle ZYW, this is ZYW right here, is 62 degrees, what is the measure of angle XYZ? XYZ is the whole enchilada. Okay, so ray YW is bisecting that angle. If angle ZYW is 62, that means that angle XYW is also going to be 62 because they have to be congruent if YW is an angle bisector. So we're asking for angle XYZ, which is the whole enchilada. So I have to add those two angles together. 62 plus 62 is 124. So the measure of angle XYZ is 124 degrees. Okay. Then the next situation, let's start fresh as much as possible. Sorry, I just erased part of that. The next part says if the measure of angle XYZ, so XYZ is the whole enchilada is 148. What's the measure of angle XYW? So we're looking for this nugget. So again, if YW is bisecting that angle, it's splitting it in half into two congruent pieces. So to get each half, I'm going to take the whole thing, 148, and divide it by 2. So that means this piece is 74 degrees and this piece is 74 degrees. 148 divided by 2 is 74. So the measure of angle XYW is 74 degrees.